We are facing an epidemic when there are houses that can be filled. They're empty right now. When there are resources to take us to war, we have homelessness abounding in this country. And I have been fascinated by the work that's happening in Los Angeles with several nonprofits and the city council. And I want to bring to the conversation this morning City Council member Mike Bonin to discuss some of these policies that are happening in Los Angeles. But before we bring, and Mike, good morning to you. I want to introduce you, though, with an ad from you. And I normally don't play political ads, but I think when the audience sees this, they will understand why we wanted to introduce you properly with this clip. So, Dwayne, before we go into the conversation, would you run that clip? I'm going to share some of my lived experience. Most of you know, I think all of you know, I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic. I have not been shy about sharing that experience. What I don't share as openly or as frequently about is my experience being unhoused. Some of those nights, I slept in my car, and a few of those nights, when my car was in the shop, I slept on the beach. I can't tell you how much turmoil there is in your heart when the sun is setting and you don't know where you can sleep. I can't adequately express the combination of shame and frustration and anger and desperation and confusion you feel in that moment. Imagine you're sitting there all day, your face is sunburned, and you are dead dog tired. You haven't had a moment to relax and to drop your guard and just to exhale. We are all fragile. We are all breakable and often break. And that we all stumble and fall down, and that we often need somebody to help us up. Yes, we have created more housing units and created more shelter beds and more interventions than ever before. But despite all that, we still do not have enough units or enough beds. And it has not been easy. Hell, I haven't got just protests, I've got lawsuits and appeals that have tried to stop or slow down everything I've tried to do. I've gotten calls from millionaires, I've gotten attacks from the police union. I've had people say, I hope your family suffers. You know what? It's okay. Because today, when I go home, I know where I can sleep. I don't have that feeling of not knowing. When I go home tonight, no matter what else, I know where I can sleep. And everybody in Los Angeles deserves to know that. Councilmember Mike Bonin, good morning to you. Thank you for getting up so early there on the West Coast, and thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great, bright and early. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
The pleasure is ours. That ad is touching, and I really think you nailed it. It's the realization that you don't have a place to rest your head when that sun goes down. That really strikes at the heart of all of the homeless and unhoused populations. Tell us about your journey from being unhoused to leading the charge against homelessness.
Well, you know, when I got to Los Angeles in my early 20s, like so many people, you know, the reality of Los Angeles didn't match up to my dreams, and I fell into drugs and was doing a lot of meth, and I wound up on some hard times, and I was able through sobriety to get my life back and to turn it around. And that's been sort of a touchstone for me, in that I know that we can all stumble and we all fall down, but I also know that big, huge transformation is possible, and people can change their lives, and nobody is beyond help, and we owe it to each other to help each other. And in LA, we're in the middle of a dystopian crisis. I mean, if for most of your listeners who aren't from LA, in LA County, there are 60,000 people who are homeless, and 70% of them are unsheltered every night. 4 or 5 people are dying on our streets every day. There are tents, encampments on streets in almost every neighborhood, in front of homes, businesses, schools, parks, everywhere. I mean, it is end of times scenarios here. And we're sort of at a point in LA where we're either going to do what we know works, which is house people and give them services, or we're going to double down on the stupid, expensive, failed strategies we've done for decades, which is try to push the problem away and criminalize it.
Mm. You know, I look at, I'm trying not to nationalize the conversation because there are local solutions to some of these problems, right? Tell us about some of the solutions that you all are taking there on the city council in partnership with nonprofits, innovations that you all have to address these situations.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot that we're doing locally to demonstrate that there is a way to house people quickly, but I'll keep it nationalized actually because things have changed because of what's been changing nationally. You know, we've had in the past year during the pandemic, the city temporarily stopped breaking up encampments because CDC said, all you're going to do is make people sicker. You're going to spread disease. Don't do this. The federal government gave us money to instead lease motel rooms and put people at the government's dime into motel rooms temporarily. Program has been a mixed success, and the city has not nearly availed itself as fully as it could have from it. But as a result of the pandemic, hundreds, thousands of more people were visibly homeless living in our parks. Over the summer, St. Joseph Center, a local nonprofit, and the Homeless Services Authority worked with me, and we helped move 213 people indoors into temporary housing through these motel programs. But the federal government, thanks to the new administration, has made permanent housing resources available, these 10-year vouchers. So we were able to get folks into temporary housing, and now we have a pathway to get them into permanent housing. So of 213 people who came indoors in August, 55 of them are already in permanent housing. That's wow. A faster clip than LA has done before. We have another park in my district near LAX where working with people assisting the homeless and a group called Grassroots Neighbors, just neighborhood volunteers who do outreach in the park. 90 people were moved indoors just last month. 11 of them are already in permanent housing. Wow. What it's about is busting the myth that people who are homeless deserve to be homeless or choose to be homeless. Okay. And instead of pushing them from one neighborhood to another, and we have a sheriff who's wandering around the city doing that, other council members who are doing that, our thing is let's get people not just a temporary place to stay, but a long-term place to stay. So they know we're not pushing them around. And that's where lives begin to change. And that's when you begin to see a visible difference on our streets.
Tell us a little bit more about that 10-year voucher. That's the distinct difference. I mean, that is long-term housing. That gives you a chance to get your entire world shifted. When did that program become accessible to the public, and how else are you all rolling it out?
That has become available because of Biden and the Democratic Congress as part of the COVID recovery programs they passed. They made these vouchers available. They're emergency housing vouchers that came about as a result of response to the COVID pandemic. And it's sort of like a lottery ticket in some ways, a winning lottery ticket, because the missing resource has always been the long-term housing. You know, you can put somebody in a shelter that gets them out of sight, but that just keeps them homeless in a less visible manner. You have to find long-term housing. These vouchers do that, but it's still tricky. You still have to find a unit for someone. You still have to find a landlord willing to accept it. So it's still hard work, even from that point, but it really has been a game changer from what we've experienced before.
Councilmember Bonin, I'm listening to you. I look at your ad. I see your passion, more importantly, your compassion. But I heard that there's a recall effort against you. What did you do to make these people want to recall you?
Well, there's a couple different things. I'm, arguably the most progressive member of the LA City Council and the sort of right-wing tool of choice in California these days, whether it's progressive prosecutors in San Francisco or in Los Angeles, our governor, or even lefty council members up in Seattle. The right-wing tool of choice on the West Coast has been recalls. And my recall is being run and managed by right-wing operatives from Orange County and from Utah. The forces behind it are people who have sued and appealed and protested to stop homeless housing in my district, people who don't want solutions in my district, which is a wealthier coastal area. People don't want to see solutions there. And there's also a big part of it, though, is I've been, the council is probably the council's most outspoken supporter of Black Lives Matter and reimagining public safety, and the police union, Conservative Talk Radio. They have all rallied behind this recall and are really making the argument that homelessness equals crime, and progressives are the cause of both of those things.
Right. That is the game. I love the way that you framed it. I mean, it's the reality, but I think that's the way we should frame it across the country, that the tool of choice in California is the recall effort. We saw that with Governor Gavin Newsom surviving against the right-wing ideologue, Larry Elder. Yep. So, and it seems like we go through this every so many years in California, and they are targeting you as one of the most progressive people on that council. I want you to leave us with your vision, specifically for homelessness. How would you, if you had a magic wand, how would you address the issue of homelessness? The floor is yours.
Well, thanks. Let me say two things about that. We're now entering election season in Los Angeles. I'm simultaneously up for re-election and probably facing a recall. Half of the city council is up for re-election. We have an open mayor's race. I think that the next 6 or 8 months in Los Angeles is going to be a citywide referendum on how we approach homelessness. Are we going to do what we know works, which is housing and services? Works for everybody. Housed and unhoused, encampments disappear, people's lives are saved? Or are we going to double down on the stupid, cruel, expensive, and ineffective policies that criminalize people and make homelessness worse and push it around? I think that's the central question in Los Angeles. I am going to stand firmly that we need to do the former, that we need to use housing and services. And what I propose is that we continue to use the federal money with these vouchers, that we continue to use state money that allows us to purchase hotels, that we purchase or lease apartment buildings, that we get people off the street right away. It is doable. I won't say I'm overwhelmingly optimistic given some of the political dynamics, but it is absolutely doable. I think people are hungry for it. It's the right thing to do, and it's the effective thing to do. And I hope that my campaign, either the re-election or the recall, can be a rallying point for this smart, effective, compassionate response to homelessness.
Absolutely. LA City Council member Mike Bonin, thank you so much for joining us. I am hoping once this pandemic and this Omicron variant chills out a little bit, I want to come over and see all the things that you are doing there, because I think we could replicate that across this country. And I thank you guys for taking the lead on that.
That's great. Love to have you. Thanks, man.
Absolutely.